Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by the Pelvic Health Professionals membership. If you are interested in learning more about how you can bring pelvic health to the yoga students that you're working with, you will want to check out our membership. Make sure you're on the wait list because there's an early invitation to join going out on December the 30th for everyone that's on that wait list. Visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com for more information, and while you're there, check out our growing resources page. Anyone can view those articles, podcasts, and more. And stay tuned. In a few episodes, I am going to be talking with my good friend Amanda McKinney about the behind the scenes of starting a membership. So a lot of you have been asking me about what it's been like to start a membership, and we're going to share as much as possible in that episode. And today's episode goes along really nicely with the topic of pelvic health. So this is episode 147 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported, because I know what it's like, yoga teacher. It is crazy how we have this whole business around knowing anatomy and how the body works and all of the different yoga poses and movements and breath practices. And on top of that, also running a business. This week, we're tackling a topic that a lot of you ask me about. It is myths around core strength. I'm sure at one point, either as the student in a yoga class or as the teacher, there has been talk about, quote unquote, engage your core. And some people are even conditioned to think that they should do this all the time. In actual fact, doing this is not as amazing as we think, and it can be limiting to our function and our movement. The thing is, while many people in the fitness world assume that all core exercises are created equal, this isn't the case. In reality, the core is a system of pressure and volume, and we want to balance out the pressures to reduce stress and strain on the core wall. So the exercises we lead should also reflect this. Lauren Ohayon is an expert on the subject matter. In this interview, she busts through some of the other myths around building core strength. We also dive into what the core really should be doing and when, as well as discussing the issues of intra-abdominal pressure and conditions like prolapse and diastasis. All of our show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/147, and there you can find all of the links. If you want to continue to learn a little bit further, if you want to hear other podcasts that relate to prolapse or diastasis, we will make sure to link to those as well in our show notes. Before we get right into this episode today, I first want to give a shout out to a podcast listener, Katie. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave a review, Katie. Katie said, first of all, I can't rave about this podcast enough. A few months ago, I completed my yoga teacher training, and during the midst of it, I met someone very special. Once completing my training, I packed my things and moved back to Ontario to follow my heart and pursue yoga, not only as a lifestyle, but also as a career. 2 weeks ago, I spoke to a business consultant who guided me in the direction of teaching yoga privately instead of in a studio setting. At first, I thought he was crazy, but after listening to the last 2 podcasts, I feel as though this is something to seriously consider. Thank you for your honesty and always showing up for us listeners. Every week, I look forward to hearing guest speakers share insightful, truthful, and personal stories. Thank you so much, Katie. I love how you were questioning this and then someone else told you, and then listening to the podcast, you thought this is actually a possibility. We have some great episodes on teaching one-on-one yoga. If you are ever looking for a topic, we have so many episodes now, and we have an amazing search tool. So you just go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look for the little search icon at the top, and you can search a specific word and it will come up with whatever episodes that relate to that. So leave your review if you haven't done that yet, either in our Facebook group or in iTunes. I try and read each and every one here on the podcast. It takes me a little bit to catch up sometimes, but I'm getting through them. Before we hear from Lauren about the core, let's hear our hot tip of the week from Schedulicity.
Hi, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Jamie from Schedulicity with the hot tip of the week. Our marketing team was inspired to take a yoga class this week, and in the meeting that followed, we noticed that we all felt more energized, happy, and engaged. It's extraordinary how yoga can benefit and challenge people of all different types and fitness levels. At Schedulicity, we know that yoga teachers see a huge variety of students, and keeping track of their individual needs can be daunting. That's why we have included a place for notes on your clients' profiles. This way you can keep track of injuries, health concerns, or other challenges. You can also tag your clients with keywords. These keywords can be used with our email marketing feature to send messages to specific groups. Keeping track of your clients in this way can help you stay connected and mindful, as well as providing them with marketing content tailored specifically to their interests.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity. Okay, connected yoga teachers, let me introduce you to Lauren Ohayon, who is the founder of Restore Your Core, an online program for women with pelvic floor and core dysfunction, and One Strong Mama, an online prenatal program. Lauren has over 5,000 women in her online programs, over 60 trained Restore Your Core teachers, and 3 Facebook groups serving over 21,000 women. Lauren is internationally recognized for specializing in core and pelvic floor issues and has 20 years of experience teaching yoga, Pilates, and functional movement. In addition to this, Lauren is also certified as a restorative exercise specialist in neurokinetic therapy and in anatomy and motion. With her comprehensive exercise programs that are designed to be effective, safe, and sustainable, Lauren focuses on helping people exercise well and more efficiently to gain core strength and ideal pelvic floor function. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Lauren. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I know, I'm super excited to get to talk with you in person. A lot of people have told me that I need to connect with you in terms of anything pelvic health, core, and just as a really cool yoga teacher. So it's great to meet face to face.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So the primary work that I do is around my program called Restore Your Core. And Restore Your Core was started as an online program for women with core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And I quickly saw that there was a really big need for in-person attention. People were asking me to do workshops, and then people were asking me to lead teacher training, which I had led in the past as a yoga teacher. So now Restore Your Core is both an online program taught by me, but it's also an in-person program taught by, we have over 70 teachers worldwide, and we do 2 trainings a year. So that's what I'm known for. It's mostly women, although I do have a lot of men, but it's mostly women. Are the women who find me are really looking for answers for their common core and pelvic floor issues like sneeze pee, leak pee, abdominal separation, which is called diastasis recti, as well as prolapse, which is where the organs of your pelvis fall out of place and slip down into your vaginal canal. So that's what most of the people finding me are struggling with, one of those issues, or actually they often go hand in hand.
Right. Okay. So when did you start doing that work then, when you're like focusing on pelvic health and the core?
Yeah. So I started pelvic health and the core. I had kids 13 years ago, and I had 3 kids back to back. So I had 3 kids in less than 4 years.
Wow.
And yeah. And I was very lucky. I did not end up with any core or pelvic floor dysfunction. However, I was teaching a lot of yoga at the time, as well as Pilates. And I was very interested in the moms, of course, after I had my own kids. And many of them were struggling with these issues. And I had been trained as a Pilates teacher at that point for many years, and as a yoga teacher as well. So I just started creating kind of a method of working with women in person. I started the online program in 2015, late 2015. And I started with a Facebook group, a free group actually, called the Restore Your Core Community, which now has 17,000 women in it. But I started just by giving free advice. And very quickly saw that, like overnight, I had hundreds of new joiners. People were recommending the group all over the place. I was making free videos every day. And then I was like, there's something here. I should just make a program. And I did. And so that was, we launched in 2015, 2016.
Oh, that's amazing. And now you have over 70 teachers teaching. Is it sort of under your umbrella of Restore Your Core? Yeah.
It's all under the umbrella of Restore Your Core. I do offer a few other online programs that are not Restore Your Core, but they are core and pelvic floor safe. But yes, and the 70 teachers, we just started the teacher training like 2 years ago. So two and a half. And we do 2 trainings a year and we only take 20 people per training. And so it's really nice. It's a really amazing group of women teaching this work.
That's amazing. I love to see any information pelvic health shared. So when we're going to dig in and talk about the core here today, let's start with like, what is the core and what is the core not?
It's not the air that we breathe. So the core is really a system. I think we have been very trained, although it seems to be unraveling, but a lot of the anatomy training that is out there very much sees the body as like a set of muscles. And this is where one begins and this is where one ends, where in fact, our body is really kind of a whole system working together and all the muscles are kind of blended with each other. And there are systems, and the core is one of those systems that to me is affected by our articular body, so our arms and our legs. However, the primary part of the core would be the front core wall, which would be the abdominal wall, the posterior core, which would be the spine, the bottom of the core, which would be the pelvic floor, and the top of the core, which would be the diaphragm. So you've got this kind of container in a sense. However, the diaphragm is very much like the upper body affects the integrity of the core and the lower body affects the integrity of the core. So we could make the argument that your core is really the integrated function of your whole body.
Right. I know. Sometimes when I'm teaching about the core, then I think, well, that's related, but that's also related. And then I'm thinking, I'm talking about the whole body. Yeah.
And then when you say that, though, people get annoyed, I think. So I think people want us to whittle it down a bit because for those clients who are injured, telling them that it's a whole body issue can feel very big. Like suddenly resolving it feels enormous. Right. Whereas when you say, well, it's just this and this, it's like, oh, I can bite that off. So sometimes I don't talk about, like, we're talking to yoga teachers here, right? So yes, that's different, but I don't always describe it as a whole body issue because I don't want people to feel like the mountain is too high.
That is so good to know. I often will talk about the core 4, and I love how you outline those 4 spots. And I get even more specific. So I'd love to know your thoughts on how sort of I was taught and am teaching, because I think there's always room to like learn. I love how you said it's a system working together and that we really want to define things anatomically, like this is where this muscle begins and that one ends. And it's not really like that in the body, but I often look at it as the top being the diaphragm, same, bottom being the pelvic floor, the back being the multifidi or the multifidus muscles, and then the front being the transversus abdominis. Is that, am I getting really super specific in those when you say the spine, and did you say the abdominal?
I don't think you're being super specific. I think that's one way of looking at it. I look at the core wall as a whole. So I look at the obliques and the transversus abdominis and the rectus abdominis as part of the core wall. And I think that what's happened is the obliques and the rectus abdominis have gotten a very bad reputation. So for yoga teachers who are not as anatomy savvy, the obliques are the muscles kind of like the side muscles, your pocket, like your side pocket muscles, and the rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscles run up and down vertically from your pubic bone to your rib cage. So just to kind of give some idea of where those are, because we're throwing out a lot of names, maybe some teachers are less aware, but I see those muscles that are villainized a lot in our world. I see them as really important pieces of the puzzle to healing. And so I prefer, generally speaking, the focus needs to begin with an injury. We need to talk a lot about, or with the core system, we're talking a lot about the transverse abdominis. But the rectus abdominis is one of our primary muscles of flexion in the body. And they're one of our primary muscles of stability and support as well. And the obliques are so important for bringing us, so the rectus puts us in and out of the sagittal plane, and the obliques puts us in and out of the rotational and the coronal plane. And when we're talking about the core system, it's a 3-dimensional core system, and those muscles are part of that 3-dimensional core system. If I'm talking too much anatomy, tell me, and I'll speak in more generalized terms. But
no, this is great. Well, I really want to come back to this, what you said, that a lot of the time, and I think I'm guilty of this, is looking at the six-pack abs or the rectus abdominis muscles. Those ones I have been like, okay, let's forget talking about those all the time, because I feel because it was swaying so much in like, I need to build my six-pack abs. And I felt like everyone was forgetting that there are more abdominal muscles that are like really important to the core. But what you're saying makes me think, wait a second, Shannon, don't throw those out. Those are still very important to our movement.
That's right. And I can very much be in the same boat with you. And for years, it was all about the TVA, the transversus abdominis. And that was all about, those are the muscles we need. Function over fitness. Like, who cares that you look like you have a 6-pack? We want to build the deeper, more stability. Like, the transversus attaches around to the back, to the thoracolumbar fascia. It creates so much more stability and support. But actually, you can't have spinal movement without your 6-pack, and not only that, your obliques are so important. The problem is that, yes, both of those muscles are both sets, which is actually 3 muscles, are both very superficial. And as a result, they are like bigger movers. And so they tend to take over more. And I think that's why they've been the bad guy. Like, oh, my 6-pack is overworking and there's no deep core. My superficial core is doing all the work and my deep core is not doing enough work. As opposed to like, well, why don't we look for balance in all those muscles, right? So why don't we look for them to work as an integrated team? Because they all need to do a job.
Oh, I love this. And I love the wording that you just used, superficial versus deep core. So that's a great way to say, like, that's all of our core here. And here are the layers that are more so on the outside of us and deeper inside. This is good.
Yeah, and which is where I think the philosophy comes about, that the superficial ones are more readily available to utilize. So they can compensate they can compensate for the deeper muscles, which is where I think multifidus also, it's like, well, the erectors take over and multifidus doesn't have a chance to work, and we need to get our multifidi working. Whereas circling back to your answer of like, do I talk about multifidus? I don't talk about multifidus the way a lot of people do, because I feel like the multifidus is part of an integrated system in the posterior body. And that when our spine is functioning well and our whole system of stability and balance is in good form, then that includes everything, the multifidus, the erectors, everything, the quadratus, like all of the muscles in the back should be operating, not just one set. The multifidus being the deeper, again, the smaller kind of deepest layer of support muscles in the back. And I think that they get neglected, but when we train our body the right way, all of it should be involved.
Right. It's not like they would just be working on their own and everybody else is on vacation. Right.
That's right. That's right.
We do get super specific with this, don't we? Like, some of us, I'm like raising my hand here, even though we're just audio, geek out on the anatomy part of it, get really excited about it. And then also, I think sometimes we make things a little more black and white than variations of gray.
Yeah. And I think it's important to have body intelligence as a teacher. So to know where to be specific and to understand the workings. But I think it's important as a teacher also, like, our clients don't care about their multifidus. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have to know also how to present this information in a way where it's digestible and interesting, because ultimately what we want is for them to be on a healing journey, but we also want to be successful teachers, and people won't come back to us if all we do is kind of go on and on about this body part and that body part. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yes. And I can see where this language would come in about this core system and the back of the core, the front of the core, the top, the bottom, and that we don't need to. I mean, some students will like to go into the anatomy piece of
Mhm.
it, but for others, you're right. They don't really want to go into this.
And I can say, as someone, I've spent years studying and teaching anatomy and biomechanics, and I can say that, like, I forget muscle names the second it comes in, it comes out. Right before I teach an anatomy class, I go and I do a refresher in my own mind because I forget it. And the way I look at the body personally is patterns. So I see the body in terms of patterns, and I teach teacher trainings in terms of patterns. I barely, in my teacher training and manual, I have the muscles outlined. However, when I'm teaching, a lot of my training is about learning to see the body, like learning to assess, to get a really strong, powerful visual assessment of who's in front of you. I don't use muscle names for that. Like, it's just
Right.
patterning. Which way is their hip shifted? Which way is their spine going? Do they preference flexion? Do they preference extension? Where are they more extended? Are they more, what's happening in the sagittal, the coronal, and the transverse planes? Are they dominating in one plane more than the other? Oh, this shoulder is hanging out more in the coronal plane to the left. Do you know what I mean? So it's more about a pattern. And I have been able to help a lot of my clients heal from their injuries by just helping them find center by utilizing these patterns, as opposed to ever needing to name one muscle.
Oh, that's so amazing. I was just working with a woman yesterday and I just said to her, like, let's just take a look at one hand versus the other hand for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly like this building this awareness, me taking a look at the way her hands were. And I don't even need to share my observations. I wanted her to really see and feel it in the same way. That's great.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I want to dig into because I've been to many classes,
Yeah.
not just yoga. I'm not going to just pick on yoga, although I don't go to a lot of fitness classes. But
Mm-hmm.
I've been to a lot of classes where someone told me to engage my core. So I want to get into this cue because you had sent me a thing that said, you know what? Not all of the time is this phrase helpful. And sometimes it can be limiting to function. So do you want to dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think there's this idea of, well, we hear it all the time. And I actually don't do a lot of yoga anymore. I do a lot of fitness. So I swing the other way. I was very deeply into yoga. Now I'm really into fitness. But no matter where I go, I hear that catchphrase, engage your core, engage your core. And I think it means different things to different people. But I think what a lot of people are doing when they engage their core is just pulling their stomach in. So if you were to put your hand on your belly right now, like maybe your belly button, and just very strongly pull that in, as strong as you can, just pull it away from your hand. I think that's what a lot of people do when they when they hear the phrase engage your core. I think they tighten.
Right.
Now there's nothing wrong with that because you're tightening. However, what I like to train, so what I'm training for in my programs is a functional core, right? So not how something looks, not getting you a six-pack core, but how is it functioning as a system? Because it has a job to do within the greater, within your body. So in core function, one of the main elements of core function is that our core is designed, like any other body and any other muscle in our body, to be reflexive, automated. When I go to open a door, I don't tell my bicep to engage to pull the door open. I don't tell my tricep to engage to shut the door. Why are we constantly cueing the core? It's very interesting. We don't cue any other muscle really in the body, except for sometimes people squeeze your glutes. It's another one that drives me crazy. Like if you're in hip extension, your glutes are going to ideally be functioning. And if they're not, you squeezing them is not going to bring about function, in my opinion. And the same goes for the core. If the core is not functioning, if it's not turning on to do a move, which by the way, muscles are never on and off. So take that with a grain of salt. No muscle in your body is ever on or off. But if your core is not kicking in, as fast as quick to the moment, doing its job, supporting you, whatever it's not doing, other muscles are compensating, right? Tightening it is not going to teach it to get there, in my opinion. Just like, engaging your tricep would, the door would get shut, but you're not really teaching. There's not a teachable moment happening here. So what I don't mind the cue, engage your core. I like when people understand that to build a reflexive automated core, the way every other muscle in our body is automated, you want to train it within the system that it lives, and it lives very much dependent on the breath system. And you'll see that in the breathing system. So for me, engage your core means to do a very specific type of breath. Your core will naturally pull in with that. And then if you want to give it a little bit of extra oomph, then you can add some extra muscular tension to it. Like you can tighten it more. But the first step is getting your breath to automate your core, because they work together as a system.
Could you lead us through that breath, how you might cue it?
Yeah, so easy. We do it all the time. So imagine you have a birthday cake with 100 candles on it, and it's in front of your face, and you take an inhale and actually put your hand on your belly as you do this, right there where we were before, hand on your belly button, if that's fine. And as you exhale and blow out those candles really long and really slow, you can even hiss it out. As you hiss, you ideally would feel that your core pulls in away from your hand. It does the exact same thing we did before when I said to you, pull your core and tighten it. Does yours do that, Shannon? Are you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm noticing it. And I cue this as the S breath in different things that I teach. So I'm so curious. Why does that work? Why, when I make this hissing sound or I'm blowing out all these 100 candles slowly through pursed lips, why does my core engage?
So, wow, how do I explain this in a simple way? The core is a compressive muscle. Like what you're really feeling happening is your deep core, right? So we're not doing a crunch. So the rectus abdominis is not very active right now. And we're not really doing a side bend here. Like we're not rotating. We're really still. So the muscle that would be dominant here would be your compressive muscle. And the transversus abdominis wraps from the front to the back like a corset. And as you exhale, you decrease, well, when you do the exhale this way, but in this specific way, you are decreasing volume, and you're decreasing volume, and the muscles that create that compression are your deep six-pack muscles.
Right.
Like they compress, which is where you often hear them referred to as a corset. I don't know if you've heard that, but like tighten your corset, or that if you look at what they look like, they're shaped like a corset, and they wrap around and attach to your spine via your thoracolumbar fascia. So they're really like the corset of the midline. And as you do that exhale, and you're decreasing space, decreasing volume, you are compressing. So your compressor muscles are working.
That's amazing. So we could, instead of saying engage your core, we can ask everyone like blow out all these candles on the birthday cake, or make this S sound breath on your.
So correct. But here's what happens. In the ideal world, yes. However, a lot of us, what we do when we engage our core is we actually brace our core. So I'm going to have you feel that now. Put your hand on your stomach and imagine that someone is about to, this is kind of awful, but just imagine it. Someone's about to punch you or kick you to the stomach. What would you do? You would probably brace, meaning do a push out. You would probably tighten and push your stomach out.
Oh, right. Oh, that's a very different thing then.
Now, what you just did there was you increased intra-abdominal pressure. And intra-abdominal pressure is not a bad thing. However, excessive intra-abdominal pressure can lead to core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And what we do know is that for people who already have core and pelvic floor dysfunction, we want to decrease pressure a lot. So strategy is really important. How you blow your candles out matters. And I can show you how you would also, so doing the breath that way increases pressure, and you actually overuse your obliques and your six-pack for that. So remember I said they're not villains. In that kind of a breath, they're kind of the villain. So if you go back and you do that long, slow exhale, and as you do that long, slow blowing out the candles, or as you call it, I think you said the S breath.
Mm-hmm.
As you do that S breath, you want to think about your lower abdominals specifically drawing backward, in and up, I say, but some people struggle with the up. So drawing your lower abdominals to the back wall. And that ideally would not have you brace or increase that intra-abdominal and pelvic floor pressure. So you like pelvic health. Might be of interest to you. I have clients, I hope this is not TMI, but I have some clients place a tampon at the entrance to their vagina. And I have them do exactly what I just said. Do a long, slow breath where they are like being kicked in the stomach in slow motion. So that slow push your core out into your hands move. And 100% of the time, the tampon falls out.
Right, because of the pressure down.
They're pushing down, which, as you can imagine, since you know so much about pelvic floor health, that is not ideal on the pelvic floor, that bearing down aspect. We should do that when we push a baby out or we defecate or even fart, or cough, sneeze, and laugh to some degree. However, it's not what we should do when we take an exhale and engage our core. And a lot of our clients are misinterpreting the cue, engage your core, and they are increasing pressure in both their core and their pelvic floor. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
That makes total sense. What I might add here is that sometimes people think, well, if I have pelvic floor dysfunction, that must mean I need to pull my pelvic floor up, and same
Correct.
thing. Yeah, there's just a lot happening there. And I love how let's bring it back to, you said we're not telling our arm, like, engage the bicep, do this with the arm. Like, we just do it. No one's telling us how to open the door. Do you have some idea then why we're getting so off track in terms of the breath and how this core is working? Like, why is it even going the other way?
It's so easy to speculate, and there are so many theories. One prevailing theory that I like, but I'm careful with. So I'll kind of explain that. The theory is that we become very sedentary by age 5, right? And so we go to kindergarten and we sit all day and we stop using our bodies dynamically. We stop using our bodies 3-dimensionally. Our core is very responsive because it encompasses both the articular and the axial body. So it's both about the arms, the legs, like it's the whole body, right? So our core is very responsive to our movements. And when we go and we start spending more time kind of in sitting, like just the same positions all the time for years and years, our core doesn't get that input anymore. Everything changes. And so we just use our bodies in a less rigid way is one way of saying it. What I don't like about this theory, so I do love the theory, and I do believe that like we just become very stuck in our movement patterns. What I don't like about this theory is I hate blaming people for their issues. And I hate, I hate blame. I just hate making people feel bad, right?
Right. Because age 5, we're pretty like, we have to follow along with the system of society. Okay. I get it.
That's right.
It makes me want to go back and enroll my kids in forest school.
And that's what a lot of my colleagues do, for sure. I agree. And I raised my 3 daughters knowing all of this, and they're going to very like traditional, like, it is what it is. I tend to think that like, we won't be that effed by our choices. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll be fine and they'll figure it out and it'll all be okay. But so I think that maybe our movement history has something to do with it. And then when we do work out, or we do like, we turn like, I don't know what age, but we start hitting the gym. Most of us hit the gym in our 20s. Like we're like, ooh, maybe I should work out. Then I think we're doing it like an hour a day in this very kind of specific environment. Again, there's no reflexive anything being taught for the most part. So it's very confining. It's like you're just doing it an hour a day, but the rest of the day you're going and sitting. So again, your body is not getting that. Maybe it's great. Working out is great. I love it. But I do encourage people to maybe add variety, sit on the floor more, change up their workstations, maybe sit to stand more, change their positions throughout the day, use their body more for like park. If you go to Target, park really far away, maybe carry more things in your arms and use less bags. Just a variety of ways that your daily movement can become more dynamic.
This is good. I mean, we hear people talk about this all of the time, to find variety in the movement and to not get stuck in that pattern. And we definitely can do this in a yoga class or in a fitness class or at the gym, like you said, or, in the movements that we do just for our daily life, like how we walk, or maybe we're always walking on really even surfaces. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I also, there's an interesting analogy that I use that I learned from one of my teachers, Leslie Kamenoff. And it's this idea that if you walk into a porta potty, it will likely smell really bad. And you hold your breath in response to that, right? So you don't think about it, right? You don't say to yourself, Shannon, now you're going to hold your breath for the next 50 seconds as you pee, and then you'll be fine. You just hold your breath. And when stuff stinks in our daily life, we also hold our breath. We also change the way we use our bodies, especially, going through puberty and teenage years. We make these postural changes to accommodate whatever it is that's happening in our life.
Oh, right.
So, when the porta potty is our life, we can sometimes change how we relate to it without realizing it. So I have a lot of clients who have a lot of core and pelvic floor dysfunction, and they are chronic belly clenchers and pelvic floor clenchers. And the work that we do is to become aware that for them to become aware of that, and then B, to start to create new healthy patterns.
Oh, I love this. I felt this for a long time before I found yoga. Well, I didn't know. I wasn't aware of it until I started doing yoga, of the tension that I was holding in my abdomen. So I love this. Our life is a porta potty when we're a teenager. Not always, but
Not
often
always.
that can be pretty rocky times.
It can be. And so we have to have a lot of compassion to ourselves too. Like, sometimes it doesn't matter. I tell my clients, it doesn't matter. A lot of my clients will say, oh, my pregnancy did me in, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we can focus on the past, or we can just kind of be in the present and see what we can do to resolve things or make them better.
So what are some of your favorite core strengthening poses or movements? What are some of your go-to to share with people who might be new to doing something with the core?
So are we talking about a population of clients who have a core and pelvic floor issue, or are we talking about like a yoga class, like Navasana, for example?
Could you do an example of both?
Yes.
Okay.
So with clients who have a core and pelvic floor issue, we are really looking to reduce intra-abdominal pressure, that pressure I just went through a few minutes ago, where you tighten your core by pushing it down and out. And to help them kind of whatever exercises they are doing, to make sure they're not, and I call this like the 3 Bs, the bulging, the bearing down, and the breath holding. And so if somebody is injured, I'm putting them through very rudimentary poses, starting with the candles exercise and then progressing into even poses on their hands and knees, like lifting one arm up, one knee up, lifting up the opposite arm and knee, finding that axial stability, finding that they can do that with candles. Plank is a really hard move. A lot of people do that by bearing down and bulging their abdominals. So building up to a pose like plank, which requires a lot of core strength and stability. So those, and poses on their back, even something simple like sliding one leg away, like lying on your back, knees bent, feet flat on the floor, and sliding one foot away, like heel slides, sliding one foot away and dragging it back in. It's kind of more of a Pilates move, but can be really valuable for helping. It's so easy to do that by cheating, by arching your back up and down, by pushing into the floor, by even flattening your back to the floor. I hear that cue a lot in classes, to flatten your back to the floor, which I don't agree with that cue. So, maintaining that neutral spine, letting your leg be really heavy, and then seeing if you can just get your leg in and out without anything else being affected will require deep core stability, that compression again. We want to kind of compress as we do that. So using that S breath, the candles breath. Those are really basic moves that I start my clients off with. If they can't do that, they can do a lot of the yoga moves, like standing poses are great. Mm-hmm. The warriors and the triangle, those poses are great. People have a core and pelvic floor dysfunction. We want to avoid big, deep back bends, for example, and poses that will put a lot of strain on the front wall of the abdominals. And then as far as core exercises for people who do not present with core and pelvic floor dysfunction. I'm not a big fan of an excessive amount of six-pack exercise. So Navasana can be really six-packy, like really recruiting these external abs, although it can be done in a way where you don't. So I like to play around with challenging poses to see, even like a kettlebell swing, which is not a yoga pose, but like something intense like that, to see, can you recruit your abs in a healthy way? Well, healthy is subjective, but in a functional way.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about boat pose, because I just shared a video with our pelvic health professionals group like today. So I love that you're covering boat pose. In a way, can you tell me some of your variations for this so that it's not all about six-pack abs?
Yeah. So the first variation that I like to think about is, are you sitting on your sitting bones, or are you more in spinal flexion, which would put you pretty squarely on your PSIS in the back. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think either one of those is right or wrong. I think you have the least amount of potential compensation being on your sitting bones. I mean, after all, we are designed to sit on our sits bones. And the path of weight from the head to the sits bones is pretty clear when we're on our sits bones.
Right.
When we rock back onto our sacrum and we are in flexion, it's not bad, because I'm not into good and bad. It just puts a lot more strain on certain parts of the body, and it makes it easier for you to overuse your six pack. So I actually starting point is I like people to be sitting on their sits bones, which for a lot of people, because of tight hamstrings, will require that they sit up on a block or two. Mm-hmm. If you have like a bigger butt, which mine is like a wider butt, you might want not two blocks, one on top of the other, but side by side, just to give room for your booty. And then you're sitting on your sits bones. And the first variation is where you walk your feet a little bit further away from you. So your feet are not so close to your sits bones. Your arms are straight up. You're straight up ahead of you, and you're just lifting one leg up at a time. I always have people start by bulging their abs. I always teach people the no before I teach the yes, because you don't know what a yes is if you don't know what a no is.
Right.
So rather than just throwing out a cue, I tell them what I want. So yeah, we exhale and draw the lower on the exhale. So we start with an inhale, and we then move into an exhale of an S breath, a candle's breath. They feel one hand is actually on their stomach. They feel their hand move away from their stomach. And as they lift the leg up, does their stomach bulge into their hand? And if it does, they're not ready to go anywhere. Forget about being on your PSIS. Forget about moving on. Forget about advanced stages. You need to learn to sit here and lift one leg up. Right. And I often tell them, try not to bear down into the other leg. So I have people actually, instead of having their feet flat on the floor, I have them put their heels on the floor. Their feet are flexed.
Right.
And then try not to dig into that foot. The further and further you walk your legs away from you, actually, the harder. So legs too close to you is going to be quite easy, and it's going to over-recruit your hip flexors. Right. However, and then heels right under your knees is a little bit too easy. Heels like 2 inches away from your knees is a really good spot. Heels really far away, like nearly an extended knee, that's a challenge. Like a big, big challenge. So that would be like a more advanced stage. And we're still sitting on the blocks, right? So you would progress that by having them come off the blocks. You would progress that by having them now, the next level, when they can do the legs almost straight and get their feet up, then you move them into the rocked back position, the posterior tilted position of their pelvis. I never have anybody do that with fully extended knees. I find that really unsafe. It's loaded flexion. I don't love loaded flexion, so I will have them regress it quite a bit. Are you following me with all these variations?
I am, and okay. I really appreciate that you've talked us through. Like, I know it's so much harder in audio, but this is great to get those variations. And so many of these things I just talked about today, but I love your spin on this with the 3 Bs, because that's really helpful. Like I often say, make sure you're breathing. Also, let's look for doming or invagination at the linea alba. And then, are you bearing down? And the 4th one I add in is like, do you like this? Is this your core strengthening one that you want to pick?
Oh, I like that.
So can you go over the 3 Bs again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bearing down is where you push your, like, and you don't have to do it with a lot of force. I showed it before, like imagine someone's kicking you and you push out your stomach. You can actually, I do have a lot of my clients do this, male and female, to put their hand over your pants is fine, but to put their hand right on their perineum. So if you don't know where that is, it's the kind of thick skin between your vaginal entry and your anus. Or to put their hand right on their, like covering their vaginal entry. And again, over your yoga pants is fine. But if you exhale and slowly push out, like you are pushing out a baby or a poo or something like that, your hand will get full. Most of us will feel our hand getting full. Like the sensation there is that there's more load there, more pressure.
Right.
That's great if you want to push out a baby. It's not great for how you get your exercises done, like your core recruitment strategy. That's not ideal. And so I often will start with like, that's what bearing down feels like just that pushing out that. And when you bear down, you inevitably push on your core wall too. It's impossible to isolate the two out. Mm-hmm. And then the bulging is where the easiest way to feel bulging is to lie. I know you're talking to me. You can't do this right now, but you can imagine it and you might even feel the reactive force. But if you lie on your back, so everybody listening, if you're not driving a car, lie on your back, straight legs, completely flat, like you're about to do Shavasana, rest pose, and then put your hands on your belly, both of your hands on your stomach, and at the same time, lift both of your legs off for an inch. And what you'll feel is your stomach pop into your hands. Your stomach will bulge into your hands. That's bulging. The same thing goes if you do, like you can do it even if you're sitting up on a chair and you push and you lift both of your feet off the floor at the same time. Generally speaking, your abdominals will push into your hands. That's one way to recruit your core. It's not super functional.
Right.
And then breath holding is simply just tightening and not breathing and breath holding. So those are the 3 Bs.
Oh, that's so good. That simplifies it. I love it. Thank you so much for...
And bracing. Sometimes I use bracing, although the problem with the term bracing is that a lot of people have been taught a good core contraction and they call it bracing. So in some schools, what I call candles, people call bracing. So I'm careful with that term now, but bracing is the same thing as like being kicked in the stomach and that kind of strong, hard, no breath involved core contraction. It's similar to like a bear down, but it's like a fast, hard, tight, quick bear down. So that's bracing. We don't want to do that either.
Right. Is there anything that you wish that, knowing like we're all learning, there's no judgment. Basically, what I mean is if I were to look back on when I first became a yoga teacher to today, I was saying and doing a lot of things that I just wouldn't say or do now as a yoga teacher. So like letting go of that harsh judgment, but is there something that you wish that yoga teachers would know about the core? Like some piece that you've learned recently, or you hear a cue or you hear the way it's talked about and you just wish, hey, consider this.
Yeah, I think the idea that when a muscle in your body has more tone, then it's a better muscle. And so I would say more around the idea of Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha, for example, which Mula Bandha is the pelvic floor contraction and Uddiyana Bandha is the core contraction. Those are thrown around a lot. Like I hear a lot of yoga teachers say, engage your pelvic floor. So I don't cue pelvic floor ever, 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 ever. I never cue engage your pelvic floor and core together. I don't cue pelvic floor because pelvic floor, again, reacts. It is reactive and responsive to the core. And so if the core is doing like a really nice engagement, the pelvic floor is coming along for the ride. And that's what we want. We don't want excessive tone anywhere in our body necessarily for function. So more tone is not always better, which is why Kegels or Mula Bandha, Kegels are not also like, it drives me crazy that women are advised to do 100 of them a day, especially when pregnant, because it's implying that more tone is more better. And it's not.
Right.
And so there are certain poses in yoga where we are over cueing the core and pelvic floor just for the sake of like, well, if I cue it, it must be good. Like if you squeeze your glutes, it must be a good thing. Like I do a lot of like kettlebell swings and I always hear like at the top, squeeze your butt, or the same thing in a yoga bridge, squeeze your butt. Shouldn't your butt just be doing its job. Like ideally, if you're in hip extension, your glutes are powering on. And so I do wish yoga teachers would stop over cueing muscular actions in general, especially core and pelvic floor. I do. Pelvic floor. If I had $1 for every one of my yoga teacher friends or clients who actually blame over contraction, over Kegels for C-sections. I have a lot of yoga teacher friends who ended up with a C-section and in hindsight feel like all of that over, and we're told during the labor delivery, your pelvic floor is not yielding. Your pelvic floor is not yielding.
Right.
And it's awful. It's so awful, A, to hear that, and B, to be like this, yoga teacher and to think to be doing everything right. And then to be told that your pelvic floor was so overly tight that it couldn't yield. So I would rather people not over cue the contraction of the pelvic floor, because you don't need your pelvic floor to be engaging every pose, every minute. You don't. There's no logic to that.
Yeah.
Just creating an excessive amount of tone.
That makes so much sense. That's so good. Like more tension doesn't mean that the muscle is working better. A lot of the times then we are holding too much tension. And like we know, we wouldn't say, oh, your shoulders, if they're really tense, they're working so well. We don't think that. We know that it doesn't feel right. And
that's like overdeveloping your traps. Exactly. Because it must be better. Like let's squeeze our traps all day long. It must be a better, people assume why do people assume that our pelvic floors are like this weak zone? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's so unfair to the pelvic floor.
It is really unfair. Oh, I love that. That's so good. If people want to learn more from you, where is the best place that they start?
I have a website called restoreyourcore.com, which is very Restore Your Core. My teacher training information is there. I also have my own personal website, which has more offerings on it, which is laurenohayon.com. Both of those places are great places to start. There's also a Facebook group. The Restore Your Core Facebook group is a great learning. I do a lot of free videos and stuff there.
Yeah, your Facebook group is great. I will make sure that we link to all of those in our show notes. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I've learned a lot, and I know that our listeners will as well.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I learned a lot from talking with you today, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. Connected Yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. How was that? What were your key takeaways? Was there something that you picked up that you were going to take into your own practice? Were you maybe practicing along with the breathing with some of the cues that Lauren was talking about? Was there anything that you thought, I'm going to try and change my language around that? A key takeaway for me in this, and a lot of the learning that I do around pelvic health, is I feel like I am forever the student in this. I'm forever the student learning how my own body works and how bodies in general work. So I am curious to hear from you. And also, if you're interested in learning more, come and check out Pelvic Health Professionals. So that's over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. In there, we have yoga teachers, PTs, midwives, massage therapists, OTs, all kinds of professionals who are interested in how we can help people with their pelvic health. I'm super excited because the membership doors open for anyone on the wait list a little bit earlier. So that's on December the 30th. So make sure you're on the wait list so that you get the links and you find out how you can join that. And if you have questions for Lauren or for myself, anything pelvic health or core related, make sure you post a question on our show notes page. Alrighty, Connected Yoga teachers, it's time for me to sign off. I hope that if you're listening in real time, that you are getting ready to take some time off around the holidays or take some time for reflection at the end of this year. I want to say a huge thank you to you. I am so grateful that you show up here, you listen, you've listened all the way to the end. Your time is valuable. The work that you're doing out in the world is valuable. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you. Also, huge thanks to our team over here at the Connected Yoga Teacher. Each one of you is super valuable, and I appreciate the work that you do. Alrighty, connected yoga teachers, you know the question that I'm going to sign off with. If you've listened to any other episode, I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected? Maybe to yourself, your yoga practice, or to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.